Good morning, everyone, guys. So the situation in Ukraine is absolutely critical. From my sources on the ground, they're saying that the Russians are looking like a full-scale, well, they're already in a full-scale invasion, but they're talking about a full Russian push in multiple directions. And if this happens, I genuinely don't think the Ukrainians can hold this off. They're really suffering at the moment, the Ukrainians. They're suffering with low manpower, low morale, limited weapons from the West, all sorts of stuff. Now, I read an interesting article as well the other day talking about we've all put a lot of rhetoric on Vladimir Putin using nuclear weapons in defense and if he's on the back foot and if it looks like Russia's losing. But I watched an article and they were talking about how Russia may use nuclear weapons if they're actually winning. And when I looked at this initially, I thought that's ridiculous. But then the more I read into it, I was like, right, okay, that makes perfect sense. And then you've got to look at the context. Every time a nuclear weapon's being used on Earth in, in a combat situation, the two times, that was when the United States, were on the front foot when they were pushing forwards. So the two nuclear weapons that detonated in Japan, it could argue that they actually saved a lot of lives by the context that the United States didn't have to do a ground invasion. So that saved a lot of US lives. It saved a lot of Japanese lives, and it also forced an unconditional surrender of the Japanese. So the scenario was if Russia makes a breakthrough, which guys, I really feel like it. If Russia manages to push in the next couple of weeks on multiple fronts, I don't think the Ukrainians have anything left to hold Putin with. But if the Russians do make significant gains, then the Ukrainians wouldn't have anything to push back against with. So what you would have is small pockets of resistance in these cities, in these towns, and these guys would fight. So in that context, in that scenario, you could have a situation where Vladimir Putin says, right, strategically, tactically, the Russians could say, look, we've won this situation, we've won this war, whatever a win means, I don't know. I'm just giving you a hypothetical scenario, guys. This is my analysis and my opinion. In that hypothetical scenario, the Russians could use a low-yield nuclear weapon and say, look, we're not going to invest any of our manpower fighting you, force on force anymore. We've already won. We're just going to keep nuking your towns and cities until you guys surrender. In that context, how far-fetched that is, that's up for debate. But historically, the only time on Earth that people have used nuclear weapons are when they were actually, on a winning streak. So it kind of took the argument of Putin would only use nuclear weapons in defense. It kind of took that argument and just totally spun that on its head. Anyway, guys, what's been happening in Ukraine? Let me try and get this in a logical order. So the first thing of note is from Poland. The Polish have been given a new missile defense battery by the US military. Now, these missile defense batteries, if you have the capacity to launch missiles in defense, you also have the capacity to launch missiles in offense. It's just the way it works, all right? There's no, there's no such thing as a defensive missile and there's no such thing as an offensive missile. There's missile launching pads and they all launch the same way with rocket fuel. They go up in the sky and they do something. So the fact that it's in mainstream media and it's come out and it's open knowledge now that there's a US, there's a US deployment of defensive missile systems to Poland. Again, look at this from the optics of the Russians. Missile systems are now being deployed in Poland. It was only a couple of, I think like last month or something, I think it was agreed or they were talking about letting the Polish have nuclear weapons. So I would put these two together and say now there's a scenario where the United States may have a nuclear launch bed in Poland for strikes in and around that region. Now, the site itself has been placed west of Gdansk. I don't want to. I'm going to try and pronounce this, guys. Redziko. in a place called Radziko, where there's a small airfield, which I think that's the strategic reason of that. It's right on the northern coast of Poland. So that would give them the capacity to fly aircraft in and land over the sea, so they wouldn't have to, civilian eyes prying on what's being seen. So guys, the situation in Ukraine right now, it's, like I said, from my sources, it's looking like the Russians are about to do a big push, on multiple fronts. And if so, I don't feel the Ukrainians can hold it. But let me just show you guys a short video because it is wild. Hang on, where am I? Now, just watch this video here, guys. So, Ukrainian men dragged out of nightclubs by army recruiters. Can you imagine these scenes if you was like in the United Kingdom or anywhere in the world? And, I mean, what are these guys thinking? I mean, I go to nightclub for vodka. Now I'm in military. Was it good vodka, Yura? Da, конечно. Absolutely wild scene. So from the article here, we've got people actually going into nightclubs now, and I can only assume, targeted raids at restaurants, shopping centres and rock concerts over the weekend, detaining men and press scamming them. In fact, guys, let's just read that article and just consider that. Ukrainian military recruiters, I'm not sure about the context of the word recruiter. Ukrainian military recruiters launched targeted raids, and the language is fantastic, at restaurants, shopping centres and rock concerts over the weekend, detaining men and press ganging them into the army. All right, so first of all, that word recruiting needs to change. If you can't have the word recruiting and raid, recruiters don't raid. All right, there's got to be a new word for that because that's ridiculous. But anyway, so this is what's happening in Ukraine right now. So a couple of things we can take from that. First of all, the Ukrainians, from what we've seen, must be really low on manpower. Like, you can't, otherwise, why would they be doing this? And if they're having to recruit people who don't want to fight, that has a catastrophic effect on the morale of units that they're deployed to in general. When I was in the military, if we had, I mean, it didn't really happen that much in parachute regiment, but when we had other units attached to us, whether they were engineers, clerks, I don't know, cooks were probably the worst one. People who just didn't want to be there. They sit there, they're angry, they don't do their job, they're difficult to work with. So in my head, I'm trying to contextualize what's the benefit of recruiting these people if they don't want to be there. So from an article, another article here from the BBC, fighting Russia and low morale on Ukraine's most dangerous front line. So they're talking about Pokrovsk now and how on the front line, there's a lot of, the Russians are really pushing in that region. Now, the Russians have held off around just over 9 kilometers from Pokrovsk. That's well within range of most company-held indirect fire. So I'm thinking 120 millimeter mortar, but I'm sure there's other systems that can reach that range. So what I would speculate is happening right now, the Russians are holding at multiple points, and then there's going to be a multi-pronged attack. Now, if you've got, like there's articles all over now saying that the Ukrainians are struggling with morale. If from what we've seen, the scenes of having to recruit people, well, I don't even want to use the word recruit because it's certainly not recruiting. But if you're having to press gang people now from nightclubs, from restaurants, from shopping centres, and push them forwards, that's not going to have a good effect on the morale. That's not going to have a good effect on the fighting capacity of those units. Now, I'm sure the Ukrainians, I'm sure they're looking at this holistically and thinking, right, we need people. And for every 10 people we send, maybe 5 of them have got low morale and don't do anything, but maybe 5 of them do. I genuinely don't know I don't know what they're thinking there, but there is this big push on Pokrovsk. Remember, the Pokrovsk region, it's a huge strategic region. There's railroads in that, north and south. Coming from the north and south, there's main supply routes going out of there, north and south. There's also a large coal mine there, what obviously, the Russians will want to get their hands on because ultimately all conflicts are over resources, whether that's humans, whether that's gas, whether that's oil, or in this case, you know, around Pokrovs, whether that's coal. So the situation, you know, it's really not looking good for the Ukrainians at the moment. And then it's come out now on, there's multiple mainstream media articles reporting on it about the Russians are using North Korean troops on the front line. Whether this is true or not, I guess time will tell. But a lot of people are reporting on it. And what I will also say on that is, remember when Vladimir Putin went on his visit to North Korea? This is when these things happen. You know, you have these world leaders, they go and meet each other. And remember, it won't be Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, I think his name is. Yeah, it was the last one. You know, it will be the entourage that go with him. So while Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong are driving around in their cars, doing bro high fives and, you know, living their best life, the real work is being done behind the scenes. It's being done in meeting rooms, over coffee, over drinks potentially, you know, and the entourage are sorting this out. So then we can contextualize now about the, in fact, let me get a picture of this. Hang on, guys. Sorry, I wasn't going to do this. So if you remember when what's his name? Vladimir Zelensky came over. Let me share this, guys, real quick, because it is perfect. The picture is the picture paints 1,000 words. So this picture here, you've got the two leaders meeting. These two guys, I mean, no disrespect to either of them, but I mean, one of them's clueless, the other one's, well, let's just leave it there. But these two won't be doing, I mean, they're probably not even talking about anything. They're probably just posing for pictures right there. So the real work will be done behind these doors, you know, and I think it is poignant that it's taken right there by those doors. So guys, I don't know where this picture's taken. It may not be those doors. It may be a door to the left or something, but somewhere behind the scenes. I just think it's a good picture with the doors behind. But behind those doors, you can imagine, you know, Keir Starmer's aides, so he would have a Special Forces liaison officer who would be in contact with the Special Forces guys who are out on the ground in Ukraine, maybe even some of the guys that have been out on the ground in Ukraine. So they will be given a ground truth. You will have, you know, people with budget strings, people who can make funding projects happen, people who can do training assessments in the United Kingdom. So the training that's been conducted in the United Kingdom will have to be relevant to the operational requirements on the front line. And then Vladimir Zelensky obviously will have his Special Forces liaison. He'll have a green liaison. He will have a training officer who can identify training locations and timings, because it's all well and good saying, yes, we can do X, Y, and Z if there's no facilities to, you know, if there's no training areas to do that. I mean, right now in the United Kingdom, we're having a problem where our own troops are not able to get on training areas because of the Ukrainians. Anyway, guys, I just thought that picture is a really good picture, and it shows you like the corridors of power which are behind there. So yeah, and so what we can take from this one then, this picture of Zelensky meeting Starmer, is they will be discussing things behind the scenes that will happen in maybe a month, a couple of weeks, who knows what those timeframes are. But then if you obviously cast your mind back to when Vladimir Putin went and met with, what's his name? The North Koreans, you know, it wasn't Vladimir Putin that went on his own. He will have had an entourage. They will have dealt with this thing. So could it be possible that there's North Koreans in, you know, fighting the Ukrainians? Absolutely. I'd say it's more than likely. And, you know, now more and more news articles are reporting this. I would say it's, you know, it's more than likely it's going to happen. I did ask my friend who's in Ukraine a couple of weeks ago, or I think last week, if he could confirm it. He couldn't confirm it. Like nobody I know out there who can confirm this. So I don't know where this is coming from. It's out on the mainstream now, so I'd say there's a high chance it's credible. Anyway, guys, I'm going to map to grid now. The main jux of this video was missiles in Poland. Now they're calling them defensive missiles. Obviously, defensive missiles. Guess what? Defensive missiles are also offensive missiles. The Ukrainian recruitment drive is, if we can call it recruitment drive, is absolutely wild. The morale on the front line of for the Ukrainian side is really low. And from my sources, they're saying that the Russians are going to do a multi-pronged attack. You know, it could be next week, it could be the week after, but it's looking like it's going to happen soon. And they're saying that because there's logistics, there's supplies, there's manpower being deployed in key locations, but they're not doing anything. I think that's what you would do in the pretense before a build-up. Look before the build-up in. Look before the 2022 invasion. There was a huge buildup of troops, of soldiers, of logistics, of medical facilities. That was all built up before they push forwards, because you have to build that logistics base if you're going to do a big push. Right now, if there is a big push by the Russians, I really don't feel that the Ukrainians have much to hold it. So what does that mean? It means NATO boots on the ground. It means more relevance, and it means more credibility with that. I think Pokrovsk is going to be that key town. And as soon as that falls, that's going to be the trigger to let NATO troops into Ukraine. And remember, at this point, NATO troops would only go into Western Ukraine, up to the river Dnipro. Then that would relieve all the Ukrainian troops then to go push forwards. It would be a massive surge. Not only would it be a massive surge, it would be a massive morale boost for the Ukrainians, because then the Ukrainians wouldn't be on their own. They would have foreign troops with them. They would have extra troops, and it would bring NATO into this conflict. Remember, guys, for those of you who've been following my channels, this one on our other, and if you've known me in my private life, I said by 2025, the United Kingdom will lead NATO against the Russians in Eastern Europe. Guys, it's looking like that every day that goes on, it's looking the more and more likely that scenario is going to come towards. Anyway, guys, I did say I was going to Mac to Brigade, but I'm going to Mac to Grid now. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, put some comments down there, share my stuff on social media or wherever you guys share it, and I'll get you guys another video later.